Greetings and welcome to ROI Clear. My name is Ray Hightower, and today we are fortunate to have as our guest Ms. Whitney Ward. Whitney Ward has an eclectic background. She is a Division I NCAA athlete. She is a business leader. She's a real estate investor, real estate syndicator, real estate broker. She's got a rich background, and we look forward to speaking with her today and learning more about what she's doing in Atlanta, Georgia, where she is based. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Whitney Ward. Welcome, Whitney.
Hey, Ray. Thanks, guys. And thanks for having me. That was a really good introduction.
Wow. Well, thank you for joining us. And, to carry on the introduction, we typically ask our guests to give us an elevator pitch. And for those who are new to ROI Clear, Whitney's on an elevator with someone she wants to influence. So, Whitney, what would you say to that person in the course of an elevator ride?
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, I do a lot, but I think the best approach I would say is I provide real estate solutions that expand access to capital, as well as commercial real estate investments to diverse groups of investors, managers, developers, while leveraging my real estate background to identify investments that offer risk-adjusted returns for our equity partners.
And you're touching real estate from many angles.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please. You're the guest.
Yeah,
you go first.
I was going to elaborate. I didn't know if you were going to
go
say
for
something. But yeah, so I own a real estate brokerage firm that's licensed in Georgia and Maryland. And so when we're more like, we look at ourselves as more like a solution-based real estate company. So we've helped people on the acquisition and disposition side. But like you mentioned earlier, my focus has mostly been on real estate investment side, either through initially syndication, but I most recently just started a fund to invest into real estate. So it's fund management, investment management, and then acquisitions and dispositions.
Okay, fund management, investment management, acquisitions, and dispositions.
Sure.
I like that because you have some synergies, some built-in synergies going in there.
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to put this all together. I launched my firm back in 2019, and then prior to that, I was a broker at a national firm here in Atlanta. But yeah, I mean, it depends on there's so many ways to get into real estate. Honestly, that's why I like the asset. I mean, you can be a broker, you can be on the asset management side, the property management side, you can be acquisitions, like you can work on the capital markets side. So when I launched my firm, I already knew I liked the acquisition side of the table. I had helped several investors buy deals, sell deals, but I still wanted to get more on that acquisition side. And so when I came up with the idea to launch a fund, I thought about what's a good way that I could come in, still help, but still be on the acquisition side without a conflict of interest that sometimes occurs when you try to do acquisitions and then also have a brokerage company. So that's kind of how it kind of all formulated and came together.
I really respect you for that. If you're avoiding those conflicts of interest, that says a lot about your integrity and to make sure that you stay above board with anything that you're doing. So kudos to you for that. Let's go back to when you started the firm. Did you start off in acquisitions and dispositions, or did you start up in investing? Like, what was the spark? Because many of our listeners are people who either own companies or aspire to own companies. What was the spark in 2019 that said, Whitney, let's do this?
Well, so if we back up, I got into real estate full time in 2016. Prior to that, I was in corporate America. So I had worked 8 years in corporate America in the sales marketing with Fortune 500 companies. And, for me, the transition to real estate came when I realized my 401k was probably not going to retire me. So, I was like, I need to find another outlet. And so real estate just was something that made sense to me. And so when I got into it, I didn't know enough to get in acquisitions when I first started. So I started in a safer route where you have less risk. As a broker, you have no risk, really. You're just transacting the deal. And so that's where I learned how the whole process worked. And so when I started, I said, I want to get in acquisitions, but first let me get into the business full time. Let me help investors buy and sell deals. I'm going to see the transaction from a seat where I take on little to no risk. And then in 3 years or 4 years, once I'm able to with the state, I'm going to get my broker's license to allow myself the autonomy to build something bigger than what I would build at just a regular brokerage firm. And so that's kind of how it transitioned. And then once I got into having my own company, it was now time. I still was doing brokerage transactions, but a lot of that was coming from family, friends, my network, just like, hey, Whitney, I know you're in real estate. I trust you. Help me sell this deal. And so that's how a lot of my business came. But then even when that was happening, I was on the back end, I was learning from different groups and operators that were already successful so that I could build a portfolio or build a business that made sense to what I could bring to the table.
Wow, there's a whole lot to unpack there. Everything from your background in corporate America, 8 years there, and seeing the opportunity going into brokerage, and then finally deciding that you were going to branch out on your own.
Yeah. I mean, it was a road.
Yes. Yeah. So now you mentioned that the thing that sparked the move away from corporate America is seeing that the 401k is just not going to do it for you in your golden years or over the years. It's not a way to grow a huge nest egg. Yeah. So you made the decision to go into brokerage. Tell us a little bit about the path. Like we're very curious about what motivated you to do that. You saw an opportunity to help people, but what are some other things that you saw that made you say, hey, I'm going to jump and do this?
Well, honestly, I was nervous about it because it's hard to go from consistently being paid a salary every 2 weeks to going completely, you eat what you kill when you're in the brokerage business. So to be honest, what sparked the actual jump was my father, who I was calling him one day. We're very, very close. And I was like, Dad, I just can't do this corporate stuff. I'm not happy. I was getting promoted. I'm very like you mentioned earlier, I played sports. So I'm very competitive and reward-based driven. So I was like, I was doing that, but things weren't happening, fast enough or in the way that I wanted them to. And it was just, I wasn't happy. And so I was talking to him and I was like, Dad, I can't do this anymore. I'm crying. And he's like, well, just quit. If you're not happy, why are you still doing something? And at the time I was 27, maybe 28. And he's like, why are you doing something with all this time in your life that you're not happy with? Go off, there's nothing to be afraid of. Even if you fail, we're here. We're gonna always help you out. And so, just take a leap. So that's the original leap. So it wasn't really, it was my idea, but it was like, I needed that push from my father. But then, for me at the time, the brokerage transition was the transition that made the most sense. It had the lowest barrier of entry. And so for me, it was like, well, how can I feed myself and make up for this money I'm losing with leaving this job as quickly as possible? And some people might say, well, brokerage takes a long time, because it does take a long time to build a business. But for me, I was hungry. I realized like, all right, the first thing I did was go on Facebook and figure out all of my friends that lived in Atlanta and just started building relationships with my nest egg of people. And that's what kind of catapulted me into doing my first deal. Got my license in November of 2016 and had my first deal in December, like a month later, that I was doing with someone that I went to high school with. So so it was just like an organic, it was a push, but I just also put the effort towards figuring out, well, who do I already know and who can I help right now versus trying to make something up from scratch.
Yes. Yep. And your drive and your discipline played a role in your success. If you got your license in November and you were doing a deal in December, you were not sitting around, and you jumped on Facebook and you reached out to everybody that you knew and built up that book of business. So yeah, much admiration. Now, let me ask you this. You're also, your background, I know you're a college athlete, Division I basketball player, highly competitive. I am meeting so many, over the years, I've met so many business leaders who have an athletics background, who've done some type of sports. It does something for you. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but connect the dots, please, between what you learned in sports over the years. You can go back to kindergarten sports if you like, but connect the dots, please, between what you learned in sports and maybe blend that with your academics, your athletics and your academics and your professional life now. Connect the dots for us, please.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, sports, it's special. And I know that everybody doesn't like sports and everybody's not going to play sports, but what I would recommend is, even if it's not sports, some type of team aspect that you can get involved with early on is beneficial. And so with sports, I felt like the biggest lessons I learned was how to lose, right? Because you're going to lose a lot as a business owner. So I learned how to lose. And when I mean by I learned how to lose is, when things don't go your way, there's sort of like that reactionary steps that happen after that. And it could be good or bad, the choices you make from a loss. So I learned how to lose. I learned how to work well with people, right? All different types of people from different cultures, different parts of the world, because some people on my team were actually not from just the United States in college. So you just learn how to work with different types of people, and you learn how to find a commonality for a big goal. You learn to focus on the big picture versus the differences that may exist within you and that person culturally or whatever,
Sure.
So those are the two big things. And I think, the last thing, is it's really like, in college, I mean, I didn't have any life. So I was, you're at practice in the morning at 6 a.m. Then you have a little bit of time to go to class, and then you have practice in the afternoon. Then you have a little bit of time to go to class, and you're doing it again the next day. Your life wasn't your life. So you learn a discipline that I know for a fact, in order to be successful, you need discipline. I think that's what playing college basketball, or even playing a sport at any level, teaches you, is a level of discipline. And I will say, at the college and the professional level, the discipline gets a little bit further than maybe high school, where you have practice maybe a few times a week, but there's not a lot of commitment. But once you get to that college level, in order to be successful in the classroom and on the court or on the field, you have to have that balance, and you have to have discipline. You have to figure out when to study when everybody else is partying. You gotta figure it out. And so I think those lessons allowed things to transition for me as an entrepreneur kind of easy. I'm not gonna lie. I think those are kind of natural. It didn't. People ask me all the time, well, your schedule is your schedule. So how do you like I would sleep in, or I would do this. You wouldn't sleep in, not if you had to know that in order, you getting up at 9 a.m. or 6 a.m., whatever time people get up, that's how you're going to get your job done. You're not going to sleep in. You're not going to sleep in. No.
You're not going to sleep in. And there's I love what you said there. You said when it was time for you to become an entrepreneur and to exercise discipline as an entrepreneur, you have been doing that already. That was your life in college. You couldn't sleep in when your friends wanted to sleep in. You couldn't go to all the parties. I'm sure you went to a few parties. You didn't miss it.
I didn't miss all of them. Off season, though.
Off season parties. Okay. All right. So there we go. And let me ask you this, because we all use this word a lot, but I'm curious what you think, based on your experience and the achievements that you have to your credit right now. How do you define discipline?
Well, that's a good question. So it has changed, right? So I have leveled up my discipline even this year more than I have in the past, because you start learning yourself, and you realize, okay, yeah, I'm disciplined, but I might be doing cheating here, cheating here. I think discipline is mostly consistency, right? And I mean, and you're probably like, well, how do you define a consistency? That's a hard question, because what could be consistent to me might not be consistent to you. But I think that anything you're doing majority of the time is consistent, right? So now, like, even like in January, I made a pact to myself, like, I started doing yoga more consistently. I don't actually drink at all anymore. And those were just just little things that I tweaked, that I saw myself, even in my successes in the past, when things would get a little stressful, I might pour a glass, I'm of age, everyone, but like pour a little glass, and, and over time, you're like, you're making choices that aren't the best for you. So like everything I do now is I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, is this going to make me better? I mean, it can be as simple as a food choice, a drink choice, a person I hang out with, a place that I go, a conference I attend. I think about, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? How can I add value? Because you want it to be mutual, but also how can they add value to me? And if it's not something that's going to help me excel, I don't choose it.
Yes. So discipline is decision making for you too. Your decision not to drink, your decision to choose who you spend time with, your decision to choose how you spend your time. Discipline flows through everything that you're doing, Whitney.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
see
well
that
put.
in you. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you assured us that you're of age, because you look like you're about 17.
Well, good. That's because I eat good.
Yeah, you're a good eater, and you exercise, and
I guess
you're a
genes
golfer too. Oh yeah, genes, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Thanks, mom and dad. Yeah, you
Right.
do that. And I love how you share the relationship there, the advice from dad, and that he and your mom said, yeah, you could absolutely rely on them when you wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You are golfing too. We had the pleasure of getting together and playing golf at the driving range at Top Golf. And I got to say to our listeners, a few of us got together to go to Top Golf, and Whitney was with us, along with some people from InvestSmart TN, Madison Adams, and one of her colleagues, Sierra. We were there, and we used the clubs that were there at Top Golf. Whitney walked in with her own clubs, and she administered to us a lesson in how golf is done. So we're grateful for that lesson. How much time do you spend on the golf course now?
Honestly, I don't. And I love that you tell that story, but I played the golf the other day. I played 18 holes
Yes.
with some guys, and I played the worst golf I ever played. I mean, even when I first started. And I think that's just another lesson. It's like, I brought my clubs because I knew I needed the practice and I wanted to get the touch, but it was just not my day. And that's just how it goes sometimes. Now I could probably go tomorrow and play a fantastic game, but yeah, I don't get to play as much. I'm kind of busy, but I'm hoping to pick it up a little bit more here in the next few months.
Yeah. And that ties into something that you said at the beginning of our conference, at the beginning of our conversation. We talked about athletics, or maybe this was before we started recording. You said that being in athletics teaches you how to lose and how to deal with losing. Could you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, some athletes have been on teams where they do nothing but win. Tom Brady, I mean, for example, he wins a lot, but or he won a lot. But I didn't have that experience. I won a lot, but I also lost a lot. And so the wins, they're like great, right? But you don't really learn anything from the wins, right? You're like, your ego gets in the way, you feel like you're the best. And so anything that you could have did better, it doesn't matter because you won. So like, what's the point in looking at what you could have did better? But when you lose, you have no choice but to look at things, that the decisions you made and the ways you went about things, and you have to correct those. And so I feel like being able to have a lot of losses earlier in my life, when it pertained to like the sport, or even my transition from college to the professional world, was as a working person, was not easy. It was a struggle for like a few years because I'm used to playing the sport all the time, and like, that was sort of my identity. And I tear my ACL 3 times and I'm not going pro. And so then I had to figure out, what is it that Whitney's going to do?
Yes.
Not everybody has that same path. Some people go to school and they know what they're going to do and they can kind of make better decisions for their career earlier on. I wasn't one of those people. I was playing a sport. And so for me, it was like, I now was able to like saw a lot of losses, and I was able to then have that reflection period to say, okay, this is who I was, and this is why I made this. And there were some decisions and things that happened in my losses that were made that were out of my control, but there were still a lot of decisions and choices I made that were in my control. And by being able to reflect now, I feel like I'm able to rewrite my future, as versus if I hadn't had those losses, I may have went down a path that would be completely different to where I am today.
Wow. So the losses, let me make sure I get this right, because you said a lot there. The losses put you in a position where you learn things you need to know in order to rewrite your future.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. I mean, everybody has different opinions about what their future, what happens in the future. Some believe that your story's already written. Some believe you can adjust it. I'm one to think that I think that we are placed in a position where there is a path for us that we're going to go down if we kind of consistently be a certain way. But there's opportunities that you can make mistakes as you grow to where you can sit back and honestly reflect on that decision. And I don't mean making blame. Even if there are some blame to be had, there's always something you could have did better. but being able to reflect that and then being able to acknowledge and be aware of what those mistakes were to then adjust your future. I think that could rewrite your story versus never learning anything from those mistakes and then just continuously making the same ones.
Right, right. You don't want to repeat mistakes. I heard Nikki Giovanni speak once. She was talking to a bunch of young people and said, make some new mistakes. Meaning,
Exactly.
you know, I've already made a whole bunch of mistakes. I'm going to tell you the mistakes I've made. Don't go repeating the mistakes I've already made. Make some new mistakes, you know.
Exactly.
So I love that. And you talked about the transition going from college into the professional world or the corporate America world.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also made a transition from the corporate America world into becoming an entrepreneur. Can you compare and contrast those transitions? Was one of those easier than the other, or were they easier in certain ways and hard in other ways? What was that like?
That's a really good question, Ray. I'd never been asked that. I would say, if I really look back, I think the transition from college to corporate was the hardest. And that was because, you know, I had been playing basketball and dedicated to basketball since I was like 12 or 13, you know, and that took, you know, you go to school and you go to practice, but there was times I was out on the basketball court with my dad and the lights are out, everybody's sleeping, I'm practicing. So there was a lot of work that was put in. And so that when you're young and you work like that, a lot of times that becomes your identity, right? Not that that's a good thing, you know, then there's probably ways to make that not become your identity, but that's what happened to me. And so, you know, once that's what you're used to playing the sport, you're used to having to get up and someone tell you have to be here and you have to do these things. When that's gone, it's almost one of the most emptiest feelings ever, because you're just like, who am I? What do I do?
Yeah.
The world doesn't care that you play D1 basketball. I love that you said that, but in reality, unless you go pro and you're like LeBron James, most people like don't care, right? So then you have to find a way to be valuable to the world again. And that's a very hard, because you don't even know who you are. So that was why that was the hardest. I think leaving corporate to become an entrepreneur, there were more mistakes from just lack of business knowledge, right? So like, it would have been nice to like have, you know, a mentor that had already started a business that could have maybe said, hey, do this type of, you know, I don't know, LLC versus this one. Not that that was the problem, but just for an example, or like, you know, just little business, you know, lessons that could have been of value to make better decisions on strategic business growth versus not knowing myself. I knew myself at that point and I knew what I wanted to do. Didn't know how I was going to get there, but I was more confident in that transition from college to corporate.
Right, right. Okay, that's helpful. That's very helpful. There are people who are listening now who are going to be helped by what you're sharing with us here. So
that's
grateful to you for that. Yeah. We are coming towards the end of our time together. This goes so quickly. I enjoy listening to you greatly, and I hope you know that. If I haven't said it before, I do enjoy listening to you. Let me ask you this few closing questions. One, what is it that you're reading or listening to right now? I having observed you for a while, I know you're always learning and you're always absorbing and always sharpening that saw. So what is it that you're listening to or reading to? Podcasts, books on tape? I still say books on tape. Am I dating myself? I say books on tape. I mean audio books.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. Don't worry about it.
Don't laugh at me for saying books on tape. But you know, audio books or anything like that. What is it that you're reading or listening to sharpen your saw and to improve yourself?
Well, honestly, right now I'm bogged down on the Series 65. I got that exam in 2 weeks, so I'm studying that. But yeah, so that's intense. But prior to working on that this month, I was reading Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. It's just another psychology book, because a lot of this is like it's all up there, right? You know, in how success happens. And so you know, it's just, he talks about a lot about, you know, you have these two systems. One is an intuitive system and one is more of a strategic thinking, slower system. And that, you know, we need, you know, how to learn to use more of the slower thinking logical system versus just, you know, that initial jumping at whatever impulsive system you have naturally. So yeah, it's a really good book. It it's something that I think everyone should kind of dig into. It's not the easiest read, but you know, with a slow and steady, it's a good book.
Slow and steady, and it helps you to kind of blend what you know intuitively with the logical side of your brain. So yeah,
exactly.
I have not read that. I've other people have mentioned it, but now that you've mentioned it, that's something that I need to pick up and dig into.
I think you'll like it a lot. Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, I did read the Blue Ocean Strategy, by the way, that you recommended. So,
oh my goodness, I love that book. I spend too much time talking about it. Did I talk about that when we went golfing? I probably did.
No,
Okay.
I think I seen it again on LinkedIn. I think you mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I need to get that one. You were like, you would like it, so I did. Great recommendation.
Good. Yeah, wonderful book. Yeah, definitely a business strategy book. So yeah, that fits with your blend of athletics and professionalism all together, you know, pulling those together, athletics and entrepreneurship all together. So beautiful. And then finally, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Whitney Ward, or you can also visit our website and reach out, www.cre-endeavors.com.
Thank you so much, Whitney Ward. We'll be sure to include those in the show notes with this episode. It has been a pleasure speaking with you today, as it always is. Thank you for joining us here on ROI Clear.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.